Vosh, with the Anna Kasparian stuff, can you address the fact that trans women aren't biological males and medical transition does partially change your sex? The clip from her was very insulting. Yeah, obviously. So, when we talk about sex, what we're broadly talking about are sexual characteristics. These are physical characteristics that are associated with either of the bimodal sexes. Obviously, we know what these are, but of course, the human zygote, our fetuses, we all come from the same body. Our bodies, by default, are capable of being a template for either sex, right? That's the reason why males have nipples. That's the reason why males have a seam that runs under their scrotum to their perineum. That would have been the vulva opening, the vulva like thing, this opening, the line. You know what I mean. The ball seam, the taint. Yeah, the perineum, the taint. Yeah, the clitoris is analogous to the penis. The blah blah. It all fits together, right? Likewise, did you know that perineum? Sorry, not perineum. The gooch, right? There's a million words. They all sound bad. Oh, did you know, by the way, that biological males, like myself, and a lot of you, I assume, you have milk ducts with your nipples, like that can lactate. You just don't have the hormones and the biological resources to lactate, but your body's capable of it. Trans women can lactate. Not all, but, under some conditions with the right, we all have the same fundamental body. So, the thing that makes your body decide to go in either direction, more towards male, more towards female, that's determined by hormones. The hormones that you get washed over in the womb and throughout your body, throughout your life, at puberty, that's what determines the expression of your sexual characteristics. And since trans people take hormones, they affect the biological sex characteristics that they have. The breasts of a trans woman are the same as the breasts of a cis woman. Like, it's breast. It's not a different. I've seen some TERFs on Twitter talk about. I think one of them literally said that like trans breasts produce sewage water, or so. It's insane the stuff people say. It's the same. Or they say they're further. Well, the time at which breasts develop can determine like their density and how they sag and how far apart they are. But fundamentally, it's a breast. Breast is breast is breast. Breasts are best. So yeah, when you transition on a hormonal level, you basically make yourself intersex because you start having expressions of sexual characteristics on both sides of the aisle, right? Like a trans woman who's been on HRT for a while and testosterone inhibitors has presumably breasts and has skin that's more female biologically. It gets smoother, blah, blah. Less in body hair. That's a sex-based biological characteristic. Far lower risk of prostate cancer, but higher risk of breast cancer. So that's also a female like sex characteristic. But they have dick and balls, assuming they haven't, had those bottom surgeried off, or orchiectomy or whatever. So essentially, transitioning makes you intersex. Where you put the line on, where you define the line on like being intersex, that's very arbitrary. But I think you could say fairly that all trans people who have been on hormones for a reasonable length of time are intersex and will be intersex for the rest of their lives. Maybe one day there will be a medical technology that allows a trans person to move all the way over, and hormones can go a pretty long way. For example, if you've never experienced the wrong puberty, so for example, let's say you're a trans woman and you take hormone blockers when you're young and then you transition with puberty, or I mean with hormones, but you never had a male puberty. Biologically, in terms of your sex expression, you're far closer to female in a lot of ways than male, and it's a lot easier too because you're not contending against like the male puberty you had. There are even changes to bone structure. I know that there are like conflicting reports on this, but I have seen so many trans women post photos of their hips before and after being on HRT for a couple years, where they're equally lean in both images, but there is a distinct tilt. It's a fat distribution thing to an extent, but it feels like the legs bow. Now, I don't know if that's real or not. Maybe it's just a fat distribution thing, but I do think it's true. Hips don't fuse till 20 or 23. Yeah, I've heard like, because your bone structure doesn't like your bones don't like stop growing at like 2. Your bones change for a while. So if you get on hormones earlier, maybe there's some degree. I don't know. That's a little more esoteric. I have heard about trans women getting shorter because of the spinal alignment changing a bit, but I don't know. The point that I'm getting at here is that yes, sex characteristics do change. Whether that changes your sex itself, right now, I don't think you could fairly say that a trans woman who's transitioned is biologically female in the way people conventionally mean it, even if they've had bottom surgery and such. Because when we say biologically female, we're referring to a broad swath of characteristics that right now we don't really have the capacity to transition people into or out of. But it's relatively close. I mean, if you think of like if you think of a transgender woman who was on hormone blockers, so they never experienced male puberty, and then they went on hormones and have been on hormones, on estrogen their whole life, and has had bottom surgery, and then you ask, okay, biologically, if they were talking to a doctor, how much of a difference would there be between this trans woman and an infertile cisgender woman? Would there be differences? And the answer is yes, there would be. There are still biological differences. The bodies aren't exactly the same, of course. Vagina and neovagina aren't exactly the same. There are differences. But is it close? Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty close. And to pretend that a transgender woman is as far from biological woman as I am is delusional, So this hypothetical trans woman that I'm referring to, are they a biological female in the way that we conventionally think of biological female? At the moment, I don't think so. But they're damn close. And to pretend that they're as far from that as I am is just delusional, Because you move so many things have been moved over, Yeah, anyway, medicine's magic, whatever. Do trans women experience sex differently from cis women? You mean like with neovaginas? Yeah, but I think that it still feels good from what I've heard. So I've never had sex with a trans woman post bottom surgery. So people online, they say it's good. Bottom surgery, for making the vagoobers is pretty good now. I hear it's pretty good. You get these horror stories now and again with specific doctors. Like there will be a doctor who's doing like a supercuts deal, $5 for a new pussy, and then it turns out they're like a hackster who does a bad job. Really unfortunate when stuff like that happens. But for the most part, it seems like the techs come along pretty well. And the phalloplasties, that one's more difficult because you're fully constructing something. There's more material. It's external. There's other considerations to make. In order to function as a sex organ, a vagina just kind of has to be soft and warm and wet, which mechanically aren't difficult things to achieve. But a dick, it's got to do stuff. It's got to zig. It's got to zag. Whole thing. That's not to say that phalloplasties are like totally non-viable. I just know that it's considered a more difficult surgery. Metoidplasties are more realistic. What is that again? Surgical creation of a penis using your existing genital tissue. Yeah, it's something with the clitoris or whatever. It's a lot of fancy pants crap. I don't know. I googled it, and like all surgical procedures, it looked disgusting. But that's you like how conservatives do that, right? Where it's like, dude, look look at this procedure, and it's like bottom surgery. Look at the blood everywhere. It's surgical. Say, well, what the do you think surgery looks like? What do you Google anything? Google any surgery. Go look at YouTube videos. It's disgusting. That's why it's yeah. Show them an appendectomy. Show childbirth. You know they shit themselves. The mom or sorry the birthing person. Yeah, they shit. Is it true that trans women have to self-dilate for the rest of their lives? No, that's not true. That's one of them hokey conservative myths. You got to do the self-dilate thing for a while, but it's a lot like think of ear piercings. If this is assuming everything's done right, if there's problems, okay, but it's like getting your ear gauge, your earlobe stretched, right? Where if you have an ear piercing, you take your ear ring out and you leave it like that. Eventually, your ear is going to close up. But if you stretch your ear out with gauges and then leave that be for a while, it's not going to close back up. You've stretched your ear. There's a Swedish trans girl on YouTube who says she needs to dilate forever. What I've heard is that's not the case. Maybe it's the case in some case. I don't think that's true forever. I've heard that's not the case. It can be an issue with bad surgery. It might depend on the type of surgery. This stuff is really complicated. Yeah, there are cisgender women who have to stretch their out now and again because they have too tight syndrome. You always say, oh, I want a girl who's tight. Listen, okay? It can be too tight. Many such cases. They're all too tight to me. It's called vaginismus. Yeah, I think I know a person who complained about having it once. Like, we're able to get it addressed. Older surgeries need more maintenance. That makes sense. It's gotten better.